The U.S.-China trade deal fueling a market rally, pushing the S&P 500 closer to break even on the year after underperforming the rest of the world so far in 2025. Is American exceptionalism back for investors? Let's bring in Ruchir Sharma, Rockefeller International chairman. He's also the author of, quote, of What Went Wrong with Capitalism. Ruchir, thank you for being here. What do you think the answer to that question is? Was American exceptionalism ever gone, maybe temporarily paused? And do you think that the developments over the weekend mean it's back?
Well, not really, because I think that what I had said at the end of last year was the fact that this trend was very stretched, that in fact never in history had one country attracted so much capital as America did over the past few years, and that we were going to return to a much more balanced allocation environment where America's weight in the global indices was likely to revert back to, let's say, 50% compared to the 70% peak it had reached. I think that process is still very much ongoing. What the trade war did was to accelerate that process. And obviously now as the trade war is winding down somewhat, we're seeing a bit of reversal in that. But on a multi-year basis, I still feel that the rest of the world's markets are going to significantly underperform that of America. And this back and forth will continue. Remember that America outperformed the rest of the world for 15 years, right from 2009 until last year.
Yeah, JP Morgan had this stat about 15 years ago. The U.S. traded broadly at par in terms of PE multiples with the rest of the world, and now it's at a 43% premium. So do you think this is just kind of a flows dynamic? It's a valuation thing, or do you think that the changing world order will dramatically impact just the desirability of the rest of the world vis-a-vis the U.S. in terms of investing in its assets?
Yeah, I think it's also going to do with the fundamentals, which is that we are still headed for a period of a weaker dollar because the U.S. is still running a very large current account deficit. The rest of the world is very loaded up on U.S. dollars and needs to diversify. And also, I think that the economic momentum is shifting, that the U.S. has outgrown the rest of the world, particularly the developed world, very significantly over the past few years. But the rest of the world is also beginning to put in place much more pro-growth policies, from stimulus in places like Germany, from China getting friendlier towards its private sector. So I think there's a lot of change underway. And I think that it's a fundamental, it's a flow, it's a valuation. All these arguments line up for these things to happen. But as you well know, these trends are never in a straight line. There's a lot of back and forth. But I still expect that the rest of the world is going to be a much higher weight. We can't have the situation where the U.S. economy is about 27-28% of global GDP, but the U.S. weight in the global benchmarks, like the equity benchmarks, is still about 65% or so. That situation is not sustainable, and I think that that's the wake-up call for many investors, even as this trade war settles down now.
Yeah, it almost sounds akin to what we've been hearing with regard to the Mag 7 for so long now in terms of just its overall makeup of the broader indexes. I'm just curious, Ruchir, for your take on the geopolitical front, because over the weekend we had developments about India and Pakistan having a fragile ceasefire there, Zelensky with Putin and the potential meeting in Turkey, Hamas as well on the potential to return an American hostage, the last surviving American hostage. How do you see the geopolitical front and these developments? I mean, do they seem optimistic to you?
Yeah, at the margin, yes. But, like one thing I'll also say about geopolitics is, we have dealt with this all the time. In my 30 years of investing, there's never been a dull moment when it comes to geopolitics, just that history is better remembered than it's lived. So we look back at the past fondly and say that geopolitical conflicts were very low. And now when we're living in a situation where there is some geopolitical uncertainty, we obviously feel tense about it. But 9 out of 10 times, the geopolitical uncertainty just fades away and the worst case scenarios never come through. So I don't think this is a particularly fraught moment geopolitically. Yes, there will always be areas in the world where we will see some tension. And it was quite distressing to see what we saw between India and Pakistan over the last few days. But generally, I take a bit of a contrarian view here. I don't think that this is a particularly geopolitically fraught situation, that we've always lived with geopolitical uncertainty, just that we remember it more fondly because the worst case scenarios do not materialize, and that I think still should be the base case.